Recording. Everything good on your side, Gabriel and Nicolas?
Good to go.
All right. Well, hello and welcome everyone. I'm Alejandro Ferrero, the Google DSC lead at Politecnico de Milano. And as usual, I want to thank you all for joining us live in today's event. As you all know, we're hosting a series of events about blockchain during this entire week. And yesterday, we had the pleasure to attend a presentation by the Phantom team who presented their project, technologies, and ecosystem. And so today, we are ready to welcome Nicolas Mussallem and Gabriel Cardona from Avalanche, who will be introducing us to Avalanche's vision, roadmap, and technical overview, as well as to the exciting world of decentralized finance. So with all that being said, I'm going to let them take it from here so they can get started with their presentation. And I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so they can share theirs. Stop sharing. There we go. You guys are ready to go.
Great. Thank you, Alejandro. I appreciate that. And so my name is Nick Mussallem. I'm the head of product at Avalanche, and I'm joined by Gabriel Cardona, who does so many things for us, one of them being a developer evangelist. So I'll do a short presentation to give everybody a background on Avalanche and what we're up to, and then we'll, after we jump into the history of the project, we'll kind of talk at a high level about what our goals are, and then we'll jump into the vision and we'll get more detailed about what the roadmap looks like. And then I'm going to hand it over to Gabriel, who can really expand on the technical aspects of what we have achieved and where we're going. So let me get my screen up here for you. Great. Okay. So again, thanks for taking the time. So Avalanche is an open source, decentralized blockchain platform that can launch new financial primitives, decentralized applications, new interoperable blockchains. Avalanche solves the issue of scalability and speed and composability in the blockchain space. And so Avalanche accomplishes this with two key differences. There is a consensus, the Avalanche consensus algorithm and its flexible architecture. So the consensus is a third generation consensus protocol. I'll cover it a little bit. That comes after classical and Nakamoto consensus. The consensus combines the best qualities of both of these, but it's more robust, it's faster, and it's more scalable. The flexible architecture of Avalanche enables the creation of subnetworks as well that can be permissioned or permissionless, and to use through the use of a custom virtual machine. So currently Avalanche supports the Ethereum virtual machine on one of its chains, which enables the developers familiar with Solidity to deploy EVM compatible applications and products. So the big picture, the mission of Avalanche is to provide a blockchain infrastructure that's scalable and flexible to accommodate really any financial product, any blockchain application, and to really deliver this concept of the Internet of Finance. So Avalanche spun out of Cornell University, where our founder, Emin Gün Sirer, is a notable computer science professor. Emin has been a thought leader and a lecturer in distributed systems space for over 15 years. His team created Karma back in 2002, which was one of the first peer-to-peer cash systems. So that was 6 years preceding Bitcoin. He's been at the forefront of all things related to blockchain for over 10 years at this point. And Avalanche spun out of his work with two of his PhD candidates, Kevin Signicki, who is our COO, and Ted Yin, who is our Chief Protocol Architect. So Kevin had previously worked at Microsoft and NASA, and Ted is one of the authors of the Hot Stuff protocol, which is currently used by Facebook as part of their Leva project. And then they are all both joined by John Wu, who's the president, who has a deep traditional finance background. He's worked with such firms as Kingdom Capital and Tiger Management. He brings a lot of balance to this very, very technical executive team. So there's so many innovations on this platform, and I think Gabriel will talk a lot to these, but one of those that we're most proud of is the consensus algorithm that they've introduced. So in the progression in the 70s, we had this classical consensus protocol where all network participants needed to vote and be unanimous in order to get agreement. There's some problems with this, and that was that it didn't scale very well, and it had a low safety threshold. And so on the back of that, came along the Nakamoto consensus, which was brilliant, and still is brilliant to this day. It does have some underpinnings that we have worked to improve on, those being scale. There can be high gas fees, the 50% safety threshold, and really, I think the big one is energy utilization. And so, in line with the Nakamoto consensus protocol, the Team Rocket introduced the Avalanche consensus protocol. And this is where this is where they really set their first tone of innovation. In this protocol, which we'll go into a little bit more deeply, scalable to millions of network participants. It has sub-second finality with really minimal energy consumption. It's got a low fee structure and a very high safety threshold. So along in this stack of innovation, which we'll go through, this was the first one that really ignited the vision for this team to set them forth in the pursuit of establishing their own layer 1 blockchain. But when we do that, let's talk about the goals for the roadmap at this point, and kind of where we're seeing innovation and where we're seeing things going. So at a very high level, Avalanche and Avalabs is a very agile organization. I think one of our greatest strengths goes back to its team and our ability to innovate. And so if you look at kind of where our competitive advantages lie, I think they really fall into 3 buckets. One is the technology. So I've talked a little bit about the consensus protocol. We have very fast transactions per second, then measured up to 4,500. It's scalable up to millions of nodes. And right now, we're currently have over 900 active validators. And there's fast finality, and that blocks can be produced in less than 1 to 2 seconds. Thank you. The second one is the market fit opposed to this model. So it's intentionally built, and it has this 3-chain model, which we'll jump into, but to have this flexible architecture that can support a variety of use cases. I mean, I think one of the biggest goals we have is to really expose and allow really anyone to build applications on a blockchain and really make it as accessible as possible to the entire world of business or whatever use case sits behind that, as well as finance, as well as deep technology. So it's really trying to serve the deep technologist and the kind of high-level business use cases. There are some built-in regulatory and compliance mechanisms built in, and also this kind of concept of the public and private blockchain, which you incorporate freely. And then third, and I think, my favorite part, what I think is our biggest differentiator, is just the team. We have an incredibly talented team, and one of the benefits of my role is that I get to work on both the business and the technical side. And as I've started, I started with Avalanche in September, and during that time, I had the good fortune of working very closely with the technology team that develops all the core. And I've been working for over 20 years, and I've never been more impressed with the capabilities of a team and just how well they work together. It really is the strongest aspect of what they have going and what their differentiator is. So with that, let's jump into kind of the high-level goals of the roadmap and what we're trying to achieve in kind of the near and far-term future. So it's a pretty agile organization. We think this technology is burgeoning. It's got a lot of growth. It's going to see a lot of change. So we're not trying to predict too far into the future about what's going to happen. We know that one of our biggest strengths, again, is the team and our ability to innovate. And we think this is represented in the current stack of technology through the 3 chains. That said, that we recognize that there are other really smart people working to solve similar problems. And so we're really looking at the entire ecosystem as a whole and trying to, while we're innovating on our own, look and see what others are doing, take those ideas, incorporate them, and come up with what we think is the best solution for the industry.
Can I weigh in, Nick?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you. Times because you've got so many good points. They're just making me have all these ideas. So to mirror what he was, a couple of points I wanted to touch on there. I would agree 100% that perhaps the single greatest asset at Ava Labs is our team. As he mentioned, we're just incredibly fortunate to all the way to our C-level executives. We just have an incredibly deep bench of engineering talent. And thanks to our CEO, who is a professor at Cornell, we have a lot of deal flow with engineers and business development people and designers, et cetera, coming out of Cornell. So one of our BizDev people is currently, I believe, the president of the Cornell Blockchain Society. So we just are super plugged in with Cornell, and we have an incredibly strong computer science foundation. And our co-founders have done a really great job. They've accomplished the dream of every startup, in my opinion, and that is to marry a really compelling vision, the Internet of Finance, with a genuine computer science innovation. So Avalanche Consensus is genuinely as big of a leap forward as Nakamoto Consensus was when Satoshi released Bitcoin. And then incentivizing the team. We're structured like a startup. So we have really the best people in the world want to join us, and they're willing to put in the best work of their life because they know the opportunity is absolutely massive. So yeah, I just want to first echo that the best asset we have is our team, and we're always hiring. If you go to, I believe it's careers.avalabs.org, I'll paste the link in a second in the chat room. We're always looking for great talent. So if you hear something today that turns your brain on and you think you have something you can bring to our team, please check out our careers page. We are hiring like crazy across the board on all of our different departments. We can't find good people fast enough, so please reach out to us. And then secondly, I just wanted to mirror how he was saying, we believe that we have a very clear vision of where this is headed, but of course we want to make our architecture generic enough and extendable enough to where other people can go other places with it. So we are really basing a lot of our work on the early work of the internet pioneers, the guys who created, the ARPANET in the late 60s and the TCP/IP stack in the early 70s and even the World Wide Web. And one of the great lessons we learned is just that it's a very modular and extendable architecture. So from the internet, we got everything from email to the World Wide Web and HTTP and HTML. We got peer-to-peer networks. We got so many different variants on that because the architecture was very generic and pluggable. So we are building the Internet of Finance, and we know that traditional finance is thousands of trillions of dollars. And we know that the people who created the web 50 years ago, their work is having an impact now greater than ever, right? You could argue the web is bigger every single day. And they were developing for a world they couldn't totally imagine. The good example I always give is the IP4 bug, where there was only 4.3 billion addresses in the original internet. We found out in the 80s that wasn't nearly enough, and now we're transitioning to IPv6. So we're not presuming we know what the world's going to be like in 50 years. The pace of change is accelerating. We're going to experience more technological innovation in this decade than we did the previous 100 years. So to say what the world's going to be like in 50 years would be crazy, but we're trying to create a platform which is generic enough and extendable enough and plug-inable enough to where people who come after us can take it where it needs to go. That's it.
Awesome. Yep, 100%. And I think that really touches on such a big point, which is that Avalanche is built with builders in mind. All right, we want to attract as many people as possible who are excited about what the capabilities are, and then take these core foundations and really drive them out to places that we can't even imagine. And that's the goal, and that's what this team's out doing. They're putting out these releases all the time to try to make a better core infrastructure that allows builders to come and really get up to speed quickly so that they can achieve what they're trying to achieve without too much overhead. Right? And that's one of our primary goals. So, I think on the big picture, well, let me jump into this kind of an overview really quickly on the architecture, right? So Avalanche has a 3-chain architecture. Each chain serves a very unique need, and I'm not going to go too deeply in here because Gabriel is really the expert. But at the highest level, you have the X chain, and the X chain is really a very fast chain. It's perfect. It's a DAG. It's the only non-linear chain. It's really perfect for things like payments processing or a routing protocol. Right? You could think of as something like on-chain DNS. This chain is built for those types of really fast transactions. The second chain is the P chain, and the P chain really coordinates the validators, handles the staking as well, and is responsible for creating the subnets that we talked about. And then the last chain, of course, is the C chain. The C chain is probably the chain that people interact with the most, and that's because it is a reflection of the EVM with some slight modifications on our end. It really allows all the smart contract and the dApps that people are so familiar with that is really driving the adoption and the growth of DeFi and everything else that's happening on chain. So that's the full Solidity support and for the Ethereum RPC. So everything that most people are used to is in that chain.
Can I wait?
So
for the next slide?
Yeah, please. No, please do. Please do, Gabriel.
Sure, I was just going to give a little bit more insight. So as he mentioned, we are a network of networks, and we have one abstraction which we call a subnet, which I'll dig into a little bit later. It's a dynamic set of validators. So today in Ethereum and Bitcoin, they have one set of miners. Our network is slightly different. We have many different networks that could each have their own set of block producers. You can think about them miners, they're validators. And then each one of those subnets can run many different blockchains. And then similar, if you think about object-oriented programming, you have a class which describes an object, and then you instantiate that into an object, and you can have a bunch of different instances of the same class, person 1, person 2, person 3. In our world, instead of launching your application as a smart contract like you would on Ethereum, you launch it as a virtual machine, which is basically the application level logic of your blockchain. It's technically it's a state machine. So there's the state of your blockchain, and there's a state transition function, and then an API that people can interact with your blockchain through. We launched our own default subnet that every single person has to validate. So if you're going to launch your own subnet and launch your own blockchain network, we require hard requirement we have is that you validate our default subnet, which you see here. And as he mentioned, there's 3 chains. So the first one is a DAG, a directed acyclic graph, and it doesn't have total ordering. It's very prunable, and it's super high speed and high throughput. So we have 4,500 transactions per second, and you can issue fungible tokens, non-fungible tokens, variable and fixed cap assets, and then you can swap them in between the chains. So as I mentioned, you can launch your own instance of the X chain. This is the Avalanche virtual machine, technically under the hood. If you launch your own subnet today, you can launch your own instance of the AVM. So we expect that's going to be very popular because payments are huge, and there's 2 really classes of tokens. There are very advanced tokens that need smart contract functionality, and then there are just simple payments. People just want rails where they can put some type of their own branding on like a token and send it back and forth for payments, airline miles or something like that. And so the X chain is perfect for that. I suspect it's going to be incredibly popular. We have what's called feature extensions so that you can always add functionality to it. Today we have SecP assets and NFT assets, and we have something called properties. We have some more exciting stuff coming up in a hard fork I'm going to touch on in a second. Then we have our platform chain. So this is what you interact with if you want to launch your own subnet, if you want to become a validator. If you can also be a delegator. So if you don't think you can run your own node and keep the uptime, you can delegate your stake to an existing validator. And then after your stake period is up, they get a little bit of a percentage of the reward, basically, and you get the rest. So the P chain is, as he mentioned, it's a linear blockchain. So as we mentioned, one of the big leaps forward with Avalanche is Avalanche consensus. And basically, it's what allows 4,500 transactions per second. We have a really great deep dive by one of our brilliant engineers, Dan Lane. If you care to dig in later, we have a blog post where a video where he talks for 45 minutes about Avalanche consensus. I highly recommend it. But Avalanche consensus has kind of a sister protocol called Snowman consensus, and it's basically Avalanche consensus for linear chains. So Avalanche is for DAGs, Snowman is for linear chains. So the platform chain has a linear blockchain like what you're used to with Bitcoin or Ethereum, and it has Snowman consensus. And then lastly is the C chain. And the real reason I cut Nick off is I simply wanted to add in here that for better or worse, it's been the perception of multiple people on our team that, I don't want to speak for the team as a whole, but I think the general consensus is that the EVM has kind of won the battle for layer 1 DeFi. Surely there will be competition in the future. I'm not suggesting there won't, but at this current moment, you can already see Ethereum's blowing up, and there are a bunch of other projects, Binance, Smart Chain, et cetera, that are launching their own instance of the EVM and blowing up. And we launched our own instance of the EVM with Snowman Consensus. So it has 100% backward compatibility with existing Ethereum dApps and developer tooling and the whole ecosystem. You can use Remix and MetaMask and Truffle and Hardhat and OpenZeppelin and all of the tooling. I think I mentioned MetaMask. All of the tooling you're used to in Ethereum is 100% compatible with the C chain. And so we have just seen an absolute explosion of dApps on our C chain. That's why he mentioned this is the one that people are probably interacting with the most. And that's simply because other DeFi networks are suffering high fees and congestion. On Avalanche, we have thousands of transactions per second and fees that at the moment cost a couple cents per smart contract call, and they will be variable in the future. I saw somebody over here that said, when the AVAX price rises, the transfer fees will also rise. What kind of solution do you think against this? To answer that real quickly, we're having a hard fork right now, Apricot. We're going to touch on it in a bit. We just, whenever we had a hard-coded fee of 470 gigaway for gas. This is when Avalanche was $3 a token. It recently shot up to like 30 or something. And so we cut that to 225 GWay, but ultimately we'll have EIP 1559 style dynamic fees. So if you're familiar with the fee structure that's getting ready to be live on Ethereum, that's what we're headed to. So to answer your question, when the AVAX price rises, it shouldn't matter too much because we're going to have dynamic fees. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of touch on what he was saying there, that the C chain is absolutely blowing up. It's like a petri dish. We just put it out there and all this life took off. And every single day, he and I are in multiple meetings with multiple teams getting ready to launch all kinds of stuff. So we're having ERC20 tokens and dApps and NFT marketplaces and prediction markets and so much more. It's really exciting, but I kind of just wanted to weigh in there a little bit. I'll pass it back to Nick.
Awesome. Thank you, Gabriel. So, and I'm going to jump into kind of this 4-point strategy, just putting on the product hat now and really kind of talking about where we're headed in the near future. And it breaks into like 4 core areas. And the first area is just kind of improving the deep tech, optimizing it. We're ultimately trying to make transactions faster, for cheaper, and while making everything more stable and secure. Right? That is kind of the trifecta we're always chasing after. And so as part of that, and as Gabriel mentioned with Apricot, and I'm not going to go super deep here because he can talk to all these, but we will be releasing dynamic fees for the XC and P chain. On the back of that, there's going to be enhanced Avalanche native token support on the C chain. So tokens that are being minted on the X chain for whatever case, you can port them over to the C chain for utilization there. There's going to be epochs, faster syncing and pruning to be handling state management in a more eloquent way to really be setting us up for the amount of growth that we're taking on now so that we don't hit these bottlenecks and that we are scaling gracefully as builders keep building. Seamless transfers, which will be just a single step transfer between chains, which is really going to enable transactions between third party as well as cross chain itself will be a big one. And then the final one that is just immediately on our roadmap is governable staking parameters, so that we're going to start to introduce more governance and integrate that with certain aspects of the properties that sit on top, like the wallet, so that and the nodes, so that governance is embedded into the platform itself and really allows the community to engage. So that is our deep tech side and kind of the core technology piece of it. The second, and Gabriel will come back to a lot of this stuff, but the second major piece of strategy is establishing these clean onboarding rails, right? So we are seeing this multi-chain universe with a lot of the kind of growing pains that Ethereum has been experiencing. You're starting to see these chains grow and try to solve for a lot of these problems to create this kind of nice cross-chain world. And so in order to do that, we need to create what we call rails, these very clean and smooth rails that allow for users to easily get over onto the Avalanche platform, to be able to interact with it and to be able to build and to be able to have as many people as possible using what they're building. So there's really 2 primary ways of doing this. The first one is bridges. And so we've released our first bridge, which was an Avalanche to Ethereum bridge, which we are constantly iterating on. But on the back of that, there's going to be several other bridges that are popping up soon. We will be introducing support for the multi-chain bridge in the upcoming months, as well as another bridge that we are currently building out with a partner that is a single transaction, much faster, much cheaper bridge than the ones that exist. So we're constantly trying to look at bridge solutions, as long as working with partners who are creating pool bridges, so that there is no actual movement of assets to either side. And the second piece is really working with various exchanges who also provide very clean rails into the Avalanche ecosystem. And so making it very easy for users to get their assets from exchanges onto the Avalanche platform, and really anywhere they want to go, right, to other chains. We're really want to make and reduce the barriers to move and use multiple chains. So on the third point of our goals is to really validate and prove the capabilities for all these technical innovations that are going on around dynamic fees and native token support and epochs and faster syncing and pruning. All these things, they need to be proven by the capabilities by building on top. So that happens through integrations with core infrastructure partners. We're currently completing integrations with Chainlink for our oracles, the Graph for indexing, and Ledger for asset storage support. Those are just 3 examples of infrastructure providers that kind of validate and help prove the capabilities. And then there are projects that we also partner with to help build, to prove out some of the functionality. Two examples on the C chain are ILOs. So an ILO is an innovative and unique application that was announced a while back, and that's essentially an initial legal offering. So this would be an example of a dApp that's going to sit on top of the C chain. And it's really crowdfunding for class action lawsuits. So it would allow users to basically raise money in order to pursue legal offerings, all through the usage of Avalanche blockchain technology. And then the other one is just, another example is like NFT marketplaces. So everybody's probably hearing a lot about NFTs right now. And so we're not trying to build out, a single NFT marketplace. We're really trying to build out a series of kind of scaffolding that allows for people to come and build the NFT marketplace that really matches and meets their business needs, whether it be a single time event that's just happening and is going to come and then go, and they want to create non-fungible assets as associated with that, or whether it's a restricted or private art offering, music, or whether it's a really open source style of NFT marketplace where anybody can really go in and upload their own assets onto and have them represented as NFTs on our C chain. And then the final goal is really just to grow our partnerships, right? So we want to attract new projects, new builders, people that are interested in really pushing the boundaries of what's happening right now, and to introduce their own applications. And then just forming strong partnerships with all the dApps that currently exist on other chains who want to launch on Avalanche to have a multi-chain offering, to really kind of leverage what they have and then offer it with faster finality, a whole new user base, and low transaction fees. And so, just to reiterate, the kind of 4 core goals are to really improve the technology, first and foremost, right? Constantly iterating on it to make it better for our users. Secondly, to establish these really clean rails to allow people to access that technology. Third, to validate and prove those capabilities through integrations with core infrastructure. And then lastly is to grow the partnerships. So at a high level, from a product strategy point of view, that's kind of where we're headed right now. So Gabriel, with that, I think I'll turn it over to you, and you can kind of take it a level deeper into the technology.
you. Okay, I'm going to share screen. I don't know if it will override you. Maybe you have to stop. There you go. Okay, you should be able to see my screen now, yes? Can someone confirm?
Yes, we can, Gabriel.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Although
okay,
it's not on presentation mode, it's only...
Yeah, I'm just going to use this one slide actually just for a second. I'm going to go
right
across tab for the presentation. Thank you though. Okay, first I just want to say thank you to Nick. Nick is absolutely awesome. He's a super humble dude, but don't let him downplay you. He's one of the best and brightest that I've worked with in my whole career. Very easy to get along with and hardworking and competent. And it again underscores just that the greatest asset at all the labs is our team. If you want to build the best company in the world, you need the best people in the world. And we're fortunate that we really are able to get the very, very best people. I feel like, and I'm witnessing it in my own workflow, and then in all the different companies that I interface with, the very best and the brightest are really being pulled into the blockchain. And that's simply because the scope of the opportunity is really huge. You know, we're redefining finance, we're redefining money, and it has such deep impact across the entire human condition and across the whole world that if we're successful, and I think we already are, in my opinion, the genie is out of the bottle and blockchain tech is successful, but it's not as mainstream as it will be in even 5 years. And we're going to be a big part of that. But if we're successful, we're going to have a radical impact on the human condition. And there's, you know, there's a lot of benefit to people who are successful in this industry. So I get a sense that the very best and the brightest are being pulled into the blockchain, and it's very exciting. And if you're watching this and if you were not trained in computer science, for example, hey, don't feel bad, neither was I. I studied music, actually, believe it or not, classical music in college. And just recently I had a conversation with the co-founder of Covalent, and he studied physics in college. And again, it just kind of speaks to the very best and the brightest entrepreneurial, the people who are creative and hardworking. All the knowledge you need is available online for free. So I was able to transition from like a classical music background into computer science over the course of about a year in my mid-20s. And so I suggest anybody else do it as well. Everything you need is available for free online. You can work in this industry if today you are not, you know, technically skilled. There's such a lack of, a better way to say it is it's very challenging for us to fill the roles on our team. And I know every other team is dealing with the same thing. So really it's about being competent and hardworking and easy to get along with and continuous learning and all of those things. But I extend the offer to everybody. The field is wide open. And if you want to have a huge radical impact, this is the time and the place where your work can have an oversized impact. The work you do today is going to ring through decades. So that's pretty inspiring. So real quick, I'll just give my little take on what is Avalanche. So Avalanche is a global financial network for the issuing and trading of all digital goods. And we enable thousands of transactions per second with millions of validators and near instant finality. And we do that using a protocol which is totally green and quiescent. And we paired this protocol with a network which can meet the unique needs of decentralized apps and financial products. And we do that using this abstraction, which we call subnets. And so subnets allow anyone anywhere to spin up a tailor-made network with custom virtual machine and complex validator rule sets. And so really Avalanche is a platform of platforms, a network of networks where thousands and thousands of these public and private subnets will ultimately emerge into this global marketplace, which we call the Internet of Finance. So as I mentioned, Goon and Kevin and Ted and John have been really successful about inspiring people simply because when you say the Internet of Finance, that's a pretty big vision. Again, traditional finance, you know, Wall Street, et cetera, is thousands of trillions of dollars. It's a really, really, you know, big amount of wealth. The Internet of Finance will be much bigger. So in the same way that the internet and the web took all of the traditional knowledge of the earth and amplified it, you know, from text to hypertext, from media to hypermedia, from space to hyperspace, it's the same thing from the traditional finance into the Internet of Finance. It's going to be a radical paradigm shift, and it's exciting to be a part of that. So we consider Bitcoin to be blockchain 1.0. So it was a decentralized payment rail. It was obvious that it was hugely successful and needed throughout the world. It was pretty darn successful, and I think it's had a radical impact. And I, you know, of course, have a lot of love and respect for Satoshi, whoever he or she or they might be. But the thing about Bitcoin is that it's relatively slow. You know, it takes an hour for a transaction to settle. It can only do famously a handful of transactions per second. Of course, there are other forks like Bitcoin Cash with bigger blocks. Obviously, I'm aware of that. But in general, the BTC that rules the world is very slow. It does a handful of transactions a second. It takes an hour to get complete finality. And it's very, it does one thing very well, payments. It doesn't really do tokens, and it doesn't really do smart contracts. Yes, Bitcoin has the script language, which allows you to do pay to script hash, pay to pub key hash, SegWit, all of those things. Yes, I appreciate that those are sort of crude smart contracts, but it's nowhere near what you can do with the Turing Complete platform like the EVM and these other virtual machines. So blockchain 2.0 was Ethereum. So Ethereum was sort of like the first decentralized app that hit network effects. There were other decentralized apps before it, but they didn't get big enough to tip and go big. Ethereum clearly did, and the big breakthrough was that you can launch your own decentralized app on top of Ethereum as a smart contract. And that's a radical innovation, and it's led to much of the DeFi that we see today. And then we consider Avalanche to be a blockchain 3.0 paradigm. And so we have 4 new sort of paradigms that we're introducing. The first is network of networks. So as I mentioned previously, in Bitcoin and Ethereum, there's one set of validators and one blockchain. Avalanche is not that way. Anybody on this call today can spin up their own subnet and can have any number of virtual machines on that subnet. They can spin up as many subnets as they want, some of them public and some of them private, and we have a whole spectrum in between. As I mentioned, we're building the Internet of Finance. And I've said these things several times, so forgive me, but I just want to drill them in. Traditional finance is thousands of trillions of dollars, and much of that is regulatory compliant. It's not completely permissionless. So we feel like we want to offer a full spectrum of best-in-class functionality. So on one end of the spectrum, you can build completely permissionless networks like Bitcoin and Ethereum. We offer best-in-class APIs to do such. But on the other side of the spectrum, you can launch permissioned and regulatory compliant networks. And we just already can tell from some of our biz dev partners that that's going to be absolutely huge. And so some of the things we have are like freezable assets, initial litigation offerings, properties, so you can tie key value pairs to addresses. So for example, you can say every single address that holds this particular token has to also have a US passport or something, so you can tie transactions to legal jurisdictions, that kind of thing. So we offer a full spectrum of permissionless to permissioned. So we're a network of networks. There will be thousands and thousands of public and private networks all emerging into the Internet of Finance. The next paradigm is virtual machines. So as I mentioned previously, Ethereum uses smart contracts. Our version of a decentralized app is what's called a virtual machine, and that's the application level logic of your blockchain, and it's basically just a state machine. And so as I mentioned, one virtual machine is like a class in object-oriented programming is the way I think about it. And then a blockchain is an instance of that class. So we have an instance of the Avalanche virtual machine on our default subnet called the X chain. I myself run my own subnet with an instance of the X chain. You can do the same. My subnet's public, yours can be private. Our default one is public. So one virtual machine can be instantiated many different times, and each one of these instantiations can live on different subnets, and these subnets can be public or private. So already, if you visualize that, you can get a sense of how heterogeneous and rich and diverse in character the Avalanche network is. And so the next paradigm is subnets. So as I mentioned, these are dynamic sets of validators working together to come into agreement on the state of a set of blockchains. So we ask that everybody validate our default subnet, which are the 3 chains that Nick previously showed you, the X, P, and C. And then obviously you can spin up your own subnets and validate those as well. And when you spin them up, you can put in a number of addresses and then a literal number. So for example, you can pass in 3 addresses and the number 2. And basically that's saying if anybody wants to make any changes to this network, 2 of these 3 addresses need to sign a control threshold signature. So that's how you can have permission networks, and then you can limit who can validate your subnet, etc. So the final paradigm we're introducing is Avalanche consensus. So we genuinely feel that there's been 3 big paradigms in consensus. There's classical consensus, which is 40 years ago, and it has really high throughput and fast finality, and it's very green and quiescent, but it's not decentralized and it's not robust, and it doesn't perform well in adversarial conditions. Nakamoto consensus was genuinely a leap forward. It's the reason all the computer scientists got so excited about Bitcoin, and it's the fundamental tech evolution or revolution that sits at the heart of Bitcoin that is such a big deal. And it's incredibly decentralized, but it has slow throughput, slow finality. It performs okay in adversarial conditions, up to 51% famously. And then there's Avalanche consensus, which we believe is as Nick said, takes the best of both worlds. So it has fast throughput, thousands of transactions per second, near instant finality. I've seen transactions settle in 50 milliseconds. That's 1/20th of a second. We say 3 seconds on our website, but I don't think I've ever seen anything take more than a second. It feels instant, as fast as a human blink of an eye. It's about that fast, literally. And that's a paradigm, that's a game changer. So, you know, I've been an advocate for Bitcoin for 10 years. I literally got my first 5 BTC for free from Gavin Andreessen's faucet. You guys may have seen it all over Twitter the last few days, this picture of this old janky looking faucet. It looks like a hack attack, but it was the real thing. The guy who took over from Satoshi when Satoshi dipped out of the scene, Gavin Andreessen, great computer scientist. I think he was from Harvard. He gave away famously, I always heard, 50,000 full BTC from this faucet, 5 BTC at a time. And this is back in around 2011, I believe, when I found this out. So I've been an advocate for many, many years. I was there for the Ethereum token sale. I was a huge advocate of Bitcoin Cash. And the problem has always been finality. People were not willing to wait, certainly not an hour for finality. So there's what's called zero conf. So you can go in and you can pay for something with Bitcoin Cash, for example, and it's secure enough. And I was an advocate of that for a long time, but it's nowhere, it's not even in the same ballpark as Avalanche Consensus. Avalanche Consensus offers complete immutable finality in about a second. You're not going to roll this back. You don't have to wait an hour. So this is a huge leap forward from Bitcoin, obviously, and it's even a big leap forward from Ethereum. So those are our 4 paradigm shifts: a network of networks, virtual machines, subnets, and Avalanche Consensus. Real quick, I know we wanted to do Q&A, so let me breeze through these. I want to just give a sense of our developer ecosystem and talk about some of the tools, and then we will, we're going to do a giveaway. We'll announce that. I'll let Alejandro speak to that if he wants to, and then we're going to do a Q&A. So let me breeze through this real quick. The first part of our developer ecosystem is Avalanche Go. You can see the URL up here. Avalanche Go is our primary full client. It's written in Golang, obviously. We have another full node, which we've written in Python. It's not open source yet. It will be eventually, of course. We're a huge advocate of open source. We use the BSD license, and so we're big fans of open source. Currently, we have Avalanche Go. There's an Avalanche Python implementation. It's not live yet. And then I know personally an Avalanche Rust implementation, also not yet public, not by our team, by a great third-party developer. And we envision a very rich ecosystem of multiple full nodes. Right now, we have one Avalanche Go, and this is the one that's been being worked on for about 2 years. The engineers behind this, Stephen, Dan, and Aaron, are genuinely the best engineers I've worked with in my whole career. Again, Avalabs has been so fortunate to get the very best and the brightest, and these guys are just supreme wizards, and they're all very young gentlemen in their mid-20s. I suspect they've got very bright careers ahead of them. But our team behind Avalanche Go is absolutely amazing. It's built with modern Golang. You can see here version 1.15 or up. It's very idiomatic. It's very tight. It has full, complete test code coverage. And we push out new releases all the time. So we just had a new release last night. And it introduced a new, there's an index built into the node now where you can query vertices or blocks or transactions by their ID. So that's very exciting. So Avalanche Go is the first part of our ecosystem. There are already some companies which are offering Avalanche Go as a service. So I know Figment does this, and there's a couple others. I suspect this is going to be very popular because we know about how Infura fulfilled a huge role in the Ethereum ecosystem, offering, Ethereum full node APIs. We also have Covalent, which just has some absolutely amazing APIs on top of our full node. And when I was previously at Bitcoin.com, and I built rest.bitcoin.com, which is like full node as a service for Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash blockchains. So we suspect there's going to be Avalanche full nodes as a service. We already see it with Figment, and we already see third-party service providers like Covalent launching really, really sweet APIs that are built on top of this, and then we offer our own index. So Avalanche Go is the first part of our developer ecosystem. The second is Avalanche. So if you are used to Bitcoin, you know about testnet. It's like a super lightweight, a reg test. It's like a super lightweight testnet that you run on your local machine. It's no networking. It's all local. In Ethereum, there is Ganache and Truffle, also some amazing engineers that I know personally, really, really smart team and great guys. So if you're working in Ethereum, you're used to firing up Ganache, which is a local network. Our Ganache is called Avalanche, the Avalanche shell. But where Ganache is a simulator, Avalanche is a real-life network of Avalanche Go instances. So it has the ability to automate environments with Lua scripts. So by default, we have this 5-node staking.lua script. So whenever you fire up Avalanche, you can run this one script, and it will spin up on your machine a 5-node staking network. I have one running on my machine. If it's alive, there's one running. And so this is absolutely critical. If you're doing development in our environment, we have a testnet called Fuji, and we have a faucet that you can get free testnet Avvox from. But before you even go there, I personally recommend having this be your daily driver. Always be testing your scripts against this. We have in the Genesis block of our P chain and X chain, there's a whale address, which I'll show you here in a second, and it has like 300 million Avvox on the X chain and I think 20 or 30 on the P chain. So by default, you can be a whale and you can test all of your scripts. So I highly recommend Avalanche. As I mentioned, it's my daily driver. I maintain it myself and Aaron, and it stays in lockstep with Avalanche Go. So there was a new build of Avalanche Go that went out last night. I'm going to push out a new build of Avalanche today because the Avalanche Go build was late last evening and I didn't get a chance to do it yet, but they stay in lockstep. If you're using Avalanche as a development environment, I absolutely recommend you use Avalanche as your daily driver. Next is Avalanche.js. So I myself maintain Avalanche.js. We have a couple other people. I've been maintaining it since I came on board. Avalanche.js is written in TypeScript. It's very, very idiomatic. It's very modern. It's a very tight and clean code base. We have full test code coverage, and we've done extensive QA on this. So Avalanche.js is an incredibly powerful library. It's akin to the Web3 of our ecosystem. So, if you're using the X chain or the P chain or the C chain, all of the functionality you're going to need is built into Avalanche.js. When you're using the C chain, since it is an instance of the EVM, you can still use Web3 or Ethers or any of the other libraries which exist for Ethereum, but similar to Web3 being kind of like the Ethereum ecosystem API for JavaScript developers, Avalanche.js is of course ours, and it works in the browser and it works on the client. And we have something worth mentioning. We have an examples directory in here that I created, which has dozens, literally dozens. I think there might be 60 or so different example scripts which show how to do everything you can possibly do with Avalanche.js. So you can do all of the RPC stuff. So our full node has a full JSON RPC, as you would expect. And then you can also do all of the different transaction serializations. So without going down the rabbit hole, we have different serializations for the different virtual machines. There's base transaction and create asset transaction, operation transaction for minting and sending non-fungible tokens. There's import and export transaction for doing cross-chain swaps. There's add validator transaction, add delegator transaction, create subnet transaction, create blockchain transaction. Those are all transaction serializations that are just strings of bytes, basically. It's not too dissimilar to what you see in Bitcoin and Ethereum. And this library creates all of those. And again, I keep this in lockstep with Avalanche Go. So as we release, for example, freezable assets in this upcoming network upgrade, we have already got the prototype working in Avalanche.js. We'll merge that code and we'll get this pushed out as well. I'm super responsive on this. So if you use this, feel free to file any issues or pull requests and they'll get included. Something I wanted to go over real quick, when I was talking about Avalanche Go, we are undergoing a network upgrade right now that's called Apricot. And we're going to be naming our network upgrades as after fruits. I believe blueberries after this, but currently we're going through Apricot, and there are some really exciting innovations in Apricot. So first off, our X chain is a directed acyclic graph. It has partial ordering. It does not have total ordering. So we're introducing epochs. And basically epochs give this notion of absolute time to this directed acyclic graph. And they allow us to introduce governance. So as Nick mentioned, governance is huge. We want to ultimately have Avalanche be a worldwide network that is governed by different stakeholders from all around the world. Of course, we don't want to drive this forever. Our intention is for this to be as public and open as the internet. So governance is going to get turned on. We also have state pruning. So right now, when you fire up a full node, you have to sync all the way back to the Genesis vertices of our DAGs and the Genesis blocks of our blockchains. Soon we'll have state summaries. So for each epoch, we'll be able to summarize everything that happened. And whenever you spin up a new chain, you'll be able to just start at the latest epoch and just spin up all the latest vertices and blocks. And that's going to be radically faster. Today, I think it takes hours, maybe even a day at this point. It's going to cut it down to minutes, I think, maybe even less. It's going to be a very, very, very great user experience. We're also having variable fees, EIP 1559. So as I mentioned, currently it's 1 million nano Avvox, and Avvox is 10 to the 9. So currently on the X chain, it's 1 million nano Avvox to send a transaction. And then on the C chain, it's 225 GUI for the gas. And all of the fees are burned, which creates deflationary pressure on the AVAX token as a fixed cap asset, there will only ever be 720 million AVAX. So it has a lot of the properties that we like about Bitcoin, all of the things that turn on libertarians and gold bugs. It's a fixed cap asset. We know exactly the rate at which it's going to be mined, et cetera, et cetera. Those same properties apply to Avalanche, but then we get a lot of the dynamic features that we love from Ethereum as well. So it's a really, really cool token. Also, we have what are called ARC20s. So everybody knows about ERC20s. It's an API for doing Ethereum transactions. It's basically a smart contract and token API. Today, if you issue a token on the X chain and you swap it over to the C chain, an X chain asset we call an Avalanche native token, you swap it over to the C chain, you can't yet do a lot with it, but in Apricot, you'll be able to wrap that ant in what we call an ARC20. It's a take on ERC20, and basically it just gives the ERC20 API to your Avalanche native token. So you can issue assets on the X chain, swap them to the C chain, and automatically interface with them in ERC20 contracts. We also have freezable assets. So as I mentioned, we have a whole spectrum from permissionless to permissioned networks, and this plays to the permissioned networks. Basically, you can imagine like an exchange would want to freeze a whole class of assets while they're investigating some suspicious activity, or if the secret key to an operational address were compromised, or anything for legal compliance. This is a totally regulatory compliant, legal compliance place. So we'll have freezable assets. We have the prototype of that working already in Avalanche.js. We're just waiting for it to go live in Avalanche Go. It should be soon. We have initial litigation offerings coming in Apricot. So this is a $10 billion asset class. Today, to bring litigation to court is very expensive and takes multiple years. So, it's basically you have to have wealth, or, you have to have some type of money to make that play. This is going to be akin to a token sell where you can raise money via issuing these ILL tokens, perform the litigation that you're intending to do. And then based on the outcome, the token holders who initially help fund the litigation will be rewarded based upon their stake in that ILO token. So that's exciting. Seamless transfers, as he mentioned. Right now, you have to do an export transaction on the X chain, an import transaction on the C chain. It's just a little awkward. We're going to have seamless transfers, which do both of those in one step. We also have Frosty consensus. So we talked about Avalanche consensus being a huge leap forward. Well, there's a new kind of consensus which we're looking into. I'll give credit where it's due. Kevin, our COO, and Steven, one of the chief engineers at our company, are doing the research. They deserve the credit, but they're doing research on what's called Frosty consensus, which basically boosts liveness while not sacrificing safety. So basically, safety ensures that if a node makes a decision, that another node won't make a conflicting decision. So if you accept transaction A, another node is not going to think A is a double spend or something like that. And then liveness is ensuring that if I issue a transaction, that will ultimately be accepted by the network, and you can trade those two things off. In our world, we chose safety to be the most critical aspect because, of course, we're building a financial network and nobody wants to have double spends everywhere. But Frosty consensus will actually allow us to boost liveness without sacrificing safety. So that's very exciting. I wanted to mention that real quick. All right, it looks like I've got just a couple minutes left. Let me breeze through this. We have full developer documentation. It has everything from our RPCs to Avalanche to Avalanche Go to Avalanche.js, everything. Again, I maintain this as well. It's open source, so there's a GitHub repository. You can see it says edit on GitHub. We want to extend it's open source for a reason. We believe that in the power of the crowd. We believe that many eyes make all bugs shallow. That's what Linus Torvalds said from Linux. And we find that to be true. And frankly, when you're building software that's critical on a financial or security spectrum, you want it to be peer reviewed. There's not enough smart people, even at Avalanche Labs, to cover every single different facet that this stuff can touch. And so we open it up to the world, and we want everybody to get their eyes on it to help us find those bugs. Same thing with our docs. Next, we have Pangolin. This is really exciting. So this is touching on DeFi. So recently we had a decentralized finance market called Pangolin launch. And basically you can see right here, I don't know if those stats are accurate or not. Let me go over to info. So you can see in the last, there's $229 million of liquidity and $18 million or so in the last 24 hours. Basically, you can swap AVAX with a number of tokens. I believe we had 300 and some initially that we built rails for, and there's so many more now launching. So if you're into DeFi, if you've used SushiSwap or Uniswap or anything on Ethereum, it's the same kind of model. It's a Uniswap clone, except it's very fast. It has all the attributes that we love about Avalanche, so fast throughput and low fees and near instant finality. We also have a bridge, which he mentioned. One of the big things we want to do is we want to bridge out to all of the different EVM instances on the other, and you can wrap tokens. So, originally there were proto tokens like Ethereum, but eventually there were so many different tokens that launched. Somebody came up with this nice clean API called ERC20, and you can take proto tokens which don't have that API, and you can wrap them. Basically, you lock them up and issue a corresponding ERC20 compliant token. We have a built-in tool. You can do this right here over MetaMask. And then you could move ERC20, ERC721 assets back and forth between Ethereum and Avalanche. And you can even call smart contracts across the chains. So a smart contract on Avalanche can call a smart contract on Ethereum. That's pretty powerful. Next, we have Avalanche X. This is our moonshot program. So we want to be able to extend grants to all the different amazing developers out there. You can see we have some pre-canned ideas, but we also allow you to submit a proposal. So if you have an amazing idea for something you want to build on Avalanche, and maybe you're looking for funding, maybe you want to leverage the Avalabs team for marketing or biz dev or whatever, our engineering team, whatever, check out Avalanche X Grant. I would say this is the place to start. See if there's something that matches your project. If not, submit a proposal. But this is a great way to reach out to us and make us aware of your project. Next, we have this Avalanche Smart Contract Quick Start. So we want to do everything we can to on-ramp developers as easily as possible. This is a hard hat repo. If you're familiar with hard hat, it's like an Ethereum developer environment tool. This is geared up for Avalanche. So it has all of the config set up. You can, with a script, it'll swap funds from the X chain and fund any number of C chains. And by default, it's got an ERC20 contract in there, and then we're wiring in an ERC721 now, and we're going to do other types of contracts as well. So check out this if you're doing smart contract development on our C chain. Don't spend 1,000 hours kind of fussing to get the environment set up. Just hit this and hit the ground running. Next, we have this Mastering Avalanche. So if anybody's familiar with Mastering Bitcoin by Andreas Antonopoulos, I'll list it right here. It's truly, truly a masterwork, and I've been an advocate of it for many years. We've referred to it many times while building Avalanche, in fact. And so all along, we've had this vision that we should have our own Mastering Avalanche. We should have a canonical source of truth created by the engineers creating this platform, which really describes everything in great technical detail. So that's Mastering Avalanche. It's got a lot already in there as well. You can check out, for example, Chapter 11 applications. So these are all apps which are already launched. I maintain this as well. So feel free to create a PR for this. And then lastly, I think my time is up. I can pass this to you if you want, Alejandro, but we're going to do an airdrop to 25 lucky members. How do you want to do this, Alejandro?
First of all, thank you, Gabriel. All this.
Yeah, that was a lot and it was fast. Thank you.
No, yeah, don't worry. I wish I would have told you there was no problem about, exceeding the time, like a little bit longer would have been fine. I'm about to share all the information on the chat. So I'm just copying and pasting this thing so they can access it.
Yeah, so the high level here is we're going to give away 25 AVOX, one AVOX each, to the first 25 people who fill out this form. We have a kind of a slight legal obligation that we have to do KYC. So you'll have to go through KYC. If you're anonymous and that doesn't work for you, you'll have to accept my apologies. But in this particular case, we need to do that. The end of the day on this Friday, April the 16th, is the deadline. So the first 25 people who can fill out this small form and put in their X-chain address and go through KYC will drop you one AVOX coming this Friday.
Awesome. I just shared the information, but basically everything is on the form, and the link is on the chat to everyone that wants to access that form. But yeah, first and foremost, thank you so much for this presentation. I'm kind of like at a loss for words at this point because there was so much content, so many great resources. I promised on the chat that we'll be sharing all these links, all these like great readings and dev documentation on our Telegram group. So after the call, we'll be sharing all these things. But yeah, really impressive stuff. I believe that our students will be interested in like finding out more about the dev that goes with Avalanche. So thank you for all that. There are a few questions on the Q&A section. If you guys want to read them out loud and provide any answers that you have.
Sure. All right, let's scroll this up. Let's see here. I think the first one I answered about prices. So yeah, we will have EIP 1559 style dynamic fees coming soon. What future developments? So I did mention that already. We have epochs with governance and state pruning and variable fees. We have ARC20s. We have freezable assets and NIDL litigation offerings, seamless transfers, and Frosty consensus. When building on the network, what are the different use cases you see that would benefit from building an X-chain native application versus C-chain? So as I mentioned, the X-chain is a directed acyclic graph. It has really fast throughput and fast finality, but it doesn't have a smart contract language under the hood. So if you're just doing something which requires payments, our X-Chain is the perfect platform for you. You can literally get finality in less than a second, and you can create tokens, very rich tokens, variable or fixed cap, non-fungible tokens. The C chain is a full instance of the EVM. So if you need Turing complete smart contracts in a linear blockchain, you're going to want to use an instance of the C chain. What are the key features of Avalanche's X-Chain architecture that allow it to achieve such high TPS? Well, it's a DAG, it's a directed acyclic graph instead of a linear blockchain. There's no smart contract functionality. So one of the things about the C chain is that every single node has to execute every single smart contract. With the X-Chain, that's not the case. So you can do transfers A to B and A to C simultaneously, and they can settle at different times. So basically, it's a DAG and credit. It has partial ordering, and it doesn't have smart contract language.
Along with the consensus algorithm.
Yeah, there you go. It's got Avalanche consensus. You might answer this one, Nick. I don't know the answer to this one.
Is there a platform? So it's a really good question. So is there a platform such as a pre-sale for projects to be created on Avalanche? If not, is such a platform create? So there's actually several in the works right now. We are in contact with a few of them, not all of them. A lot of people are just building and then launching without any discussion with us. But there is one that is scheduled to launch in the May timeframe. So yes, that one's in the process.
It says, what is your analysis of the invalid minting bug and that happened in February, and what steps are being taken on the Avalanche blockchain to safeguard against potential issues that may happen in the future? So I'm going to defer this to the absolutely amazing blog post that was written by our Vice President of Engineering, Patrick, who recently joined us from Coinbase, where he was the head of the Rosetta project, I believe. We have a really great blog post where he goes in great depth to answer your question there. So I'm going to defer to that. As Alejandro mentioned, after this, we're going to paste all of these links in the Telegram channel. So it says, given a do-over, what decisions would you do? Oh, that's a great question. You want to go there?
So yeah, I mean, wow. Hindsight is 2020. So I think kind of looking back, I'm going to say that we probably wouldn't change much because everything that we've kind of fallen into, we've learned from. I only wish that we had all kind of started earlier. Like, time is our biggest enemy at this point. And so we just feel like we want to do so much and have so little time to do it. But, you know, I think we're pretty happy with where things are. We can always improve, and we're just going to keep working to kind of iterate over it and put out the best products we can.
Yeah, one thing that comes to mind that I would have liked to have seen different is right now, you do there could be small subtleties. Like right now, if you create a subnet, the address structure is like subnet ID dash address, or I'm sorry, blockchain ID dash address, but those blockchain IDs are universal in the system. So if we had them be universal per like 2 to the 128 more different subnets or more different chains for each subnet. Basically, that's one design decision, but it would have been more awkward if the addresses had been subnet, which is a 32 character hash, dash address and blockchain, which is a 32 character hash, dash a BEC32 address. It would have looked very ugly. So right now we just have it a 32 character dash, but yeah, small things like that. But I agree. I think out of the many different systems I've worked on, the architecture is just a pleasure. It endlessly like turns on my brain. This is something you can just endlessly unpack and fall into. So I think we did good there. It says, don't you think that permission subnets are against the fundamental principle of open, decentralized, and permissionless blockchain? I view it a little differently. So first, we're approaching this from, we want to create the Internet of Finance. And so we're approaching it that the problem we're solving is going to address a market which is regulatory compliant by nature. So we need to provide that functionality. So in a sense, the question doesn't totally fit the situation because that's the solution we need to the problem. But I would twist what you're saying a little different. To me, you know, open source is about giving people the opportunity to do what they want. And so in this particular case, we're offering a complete spectrum of permissionless to permission networks. If you want to launch the next Bitcoin completely permissionless network, you can do it on Avalanche, and this is the best platform to do it. And so we have the best-in-class APIs for permissionless and decentralized networks. I don't think we're taking a shot at that in any way. We just also happen to have permissioned and regulatory compliant networks. When would Avox be fully supported by Ledger or Trezor, Nick?
Yeah, so very soon. XC and ERC20 support will be out within the next month.
Got it.
So just thanks for your patience there, and we're just working through the final stages.
Why the KYC for the airdrop? Maybe Nick can answer this better than myself, but we had to do KYC for our token sale as well. We're a US-based company, and frankly, it's challenging to do token stuff in the United States. So we have to cover all of our bases, frankly. That's
a really good summary, right? The US is, the regulations and restrictions in the US, especially around crypto, are very tight, tighter than they are across most other global entities. And so we're just need to make sure that we're staying compliant.
And so doesn't the deflationary nature of AVAX hinder its capabilities of becoming an actual currency? So this is a question that many people have, and I myself have asked this. It's a weird intuition when you think there's only so much of something and it's getting burned. Eventually, isn't all going to be burned away? And that's a totally natural intuition. Part of what we suspect is that as it gains in value, and as we have dynamic fees, we'll be burning much less and less over time. We also, you can create subnets that don't require AVAX to do transactions. So, right now, if you check out our Avalanche Go VMs directory, you'll see there is a simple timestamp VM, which basically just every time you create a transaction, it creates a new block with the timestamp of your transactions. Very, very simple. It doesn't require AVAX to do fees. So it's entirely possible that some of these subnets which blow up on the Avalanche network won't be burning Avalanche or AVAX. And then ultimately, it's a governable system. So today it's a hard-coded parameter that there's only 720 million, but perhaps that would change in the future. I don't want to panic people. It's definitely something we have baked into the system now, but the point of governance is allowing those levers to be in place. So maybe in the super far future, there will be a reason to change that. Again, I don't want to panic people. Today we're a fixed cap asset, but it is a possibility in the governance system. So.
Okay, I mean, that was a pretty fast Q&A, but definitely very clear. Thank you for, answering all those questions. As I said, this was amazing from the beginning to the ending. Absolute priceless content here. Thank you so much, Nicholas, Gabriel.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us. Great questions too. Appreciate that.
This for us, amazing. So as I said, thank you for collaborating with us. We're looking forward to all the changes and to all the innovation that Avalanche is bringing to the blockchain industry. And we'll be posting this recording soon after the end, which is right now. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.